Well, hey everybody, this is Jared Malat, and this is the Coltist, a Indianapolis Colts podcast. Um, it's here Wednesday night, um, right before Thursday Night Football, right? Today's September 15th. Recording my second episode of my podcast. I want to make sure that we start off by saying, hey, if you haven't already, get vaccinated, and when you leave your house, wear a mask, especially when you're indoors around or you're around a whole bunch of people. And then, um, obviously, I'm still kind of processing the loss. Um, the Colts lost, of course, week one at home. Um, where the Colts are typically really good. For example, they were 6-2 last year. And I guess I also want to lead in with I don't expect the Colts to win this weekend. The Rams are coming to town hot. Matt Stafford had a really good week one, was arguably the best in the NFL week one on his new team. And I also don't want to sit here and bash Carson Wentz, but I also want to say this. Carson Wentz picked the wrong team to come in without a bunch of laps in the pool. You got to be a well-oiled machine on offense to compete with the Seattle Seahawks because they're sort of like an upbeat, up-tempo organization, right, top to bottom. They're world class, and the Colts are notorious in this regime for not playing their starters in the preseason. And then the NFL took away a week of the preseason and added a regular season game. And based on what I saw on Monday, I believe the Colts have a chance to win about 10 of their remaining games. I'm not considering this one of them. Um, the Colts are going to struggle to cover about four uh, pretty good wide receivers from the LA Rams. And that's me. I hope this podcast gets listens to by Colts players, right? Specifically, hey guys, your cornerbacks and your slots are gonna have to play out of their mind and stick to these guys' hips like glue. Otherwise, Matt's gonna pick you apart. Um, they don't have a lot of depth at running back. That doesn't mean that they can't run the ball, and it just means that it's a weakness for them that the Colts can attack. If you can get a lid on whoever is toting the rock and pretty consistently get a lick on them, um, you can sit them down, right? Make them hurt a little bit, and they'll go sit down. And again, I'm not trying to encourage um, violent play, but football is a naturally violent game, and something I've sort of noticed in the NFL is guys get really good at getting being productive with the football and then getting down or getting out of bounds before they take a big hit, right? And that's sort of indicative of a smart football player is one that isn't taking big hits all the time. And also want to throw a nod to Tom Brady. He did talk about how a lot of the big hits on receivers are the quarterback's fault, and that's just poor location on the football, right? Um, in terms of what happened in Week One, the Colts just had a very subpar output from like an efficiency perspective. Um, they were like 4 for 9 on third down. 9 third down attempts just isn't a lot. So they shot themselves in the foot on drives, which stunted their ability to score. Uh, and then they allowed um, like 28 points, and they allowed it is basically like the Colts are playing hesitant on defense, and then being sort of I wouldn't say necessarily aimless, but that does feel pretty right. It feels correct. That usually the first thing that comes to your mind is correct. Um, it didn't feel like we had a plan. And I get it. When you're missing a linchpin left tackle and you have a right-handed quarterback, you're gonna let pressure some percentage of the time to Carson Wentz's backside. The way you combat that, in my eyes, is to put a tight end consistently to Carson Wentz's left, try to predicate the ball to the right hash so that you're playing away from you're running towards where they would try to be sending pressure where they would be expected to give up pressure, right? You're going to put a you're going to run like a a power or an outside zone to the left with a tight end. I would line up in split backs, for example, and use the play side back not just as a ball carrier, but also as a like a fullback, a lead blocker, um, in the face of not having a strong left tackle. Now you get Eric Fisher back healthy. It changes the story because you know that he's not going to allow pressure. So now you have the blind side covered up, and it opens up your offense. Now, once your offensive line woes are healed, and we're by no mean over those. I just want to make sure that, again, we're leveling with our audience and saying, hey, I want to temper our expectations starting out here because Braden Smith's foot is being evaluated. That's your front. That's your front. It's called your front side tackle for a right-handed quarterback. Um, so Braden Smith's being evaluated for a foot injury, and Eric Fisher's iffy, your blindside tackle. So in my eyes, that puts a lot of pressure on your guards and center to control your line of scrimmage. And short of lining up in double tight ends and single wide receivers, and I would highly encourage the Colts cut down on the movement. I watched a lot of football this weekend, and as one of the things I noticed, there's way too much shifting and all that going on. And every team I felt like I watched at college and NFL, and I even kind of went down that road when I was started coaching here this past year, coached semi-pro football, and a lot of the offensive scheme I was drawing up was disguising concepts using motion up to mostly trying to get off a jet sweep on somebody, right? Like the big plays, I want to throw the fade and then run the jet sweep and run pitches and big plays, splashy stuff. I played football. I want to score. Um, and I also want to make sure I get this on wax. After last football season, after the national championships, I watched and of course you can go find it, so I'm not telling you like a story, a unique story, but I listened to Nick Saban's end of year press conference, and I'm gonna be terrible at paraphrasing. What he laid out was over the course of his career, he had predicated his teams on play outstanding defense, uh, be excellent at special teams, um, run the football, attack vertically in the air, control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. You know what I mean? Like I'm just saying like general good football. What is considered good football? That Alabama football, right? Well, the problem is that he admits that like that now loses 2 games a year because there's teams out here that can score in 3 plays in under 2 minutes every time they touch the ball. Whether you like it or not, they're going to go down and score a touchdown. They're hyper efficient on offense. And I'm a firm believer of there are about half the offenses in the NFL are just automatic on offense. They're going to score more than like 24 points a game, for example. And I'm just throwing throwing a dart at a dartboard and hit 24 in my mind, right? Um, the problem with the Colts is like they had bad efficiency on offense, and then they allowed the opposing offense to be hyper efficient. Um, they didn't get a lick. One of the big things that's going by the wayside really fast in the NFL is the physical component. Um, it's hard to express, and I get it. I hate to say it out loud, but I think from a survival of the fittest perspective, there are some games that you just don't care as much about that outcome as you do a conference opponent or a division opponent. So I don't want to be. I certainly don't want to start my coaching career and then also be on a podcast very early in it saying some games don't matter. They all matter, right? The reality is there are some games whose outcome I'm more concerned with. And a non conference, non division opponent, I want to win all my home games. I want to win every game, right? But I especially want to win my home games. I especially want to win my home openers. I think that the reason the Colts lost is because they played an excellent, a top tier organization that I expect to not only be a playoff team, but they are a playoff team just about every year. And that if we continue to play like that, you're not going to win very many games. That sort of outing has a very low percentage of winning. That's like well a 4-13. Because remember, there's 17 games this year. Um, if the Colts continue to play that way, they'll be picking in the top 10, or they probably would need to shut Carson Wentz down to avoid giving up a pick for him, right? That's again a consideration that's going to have to be on the table at some point. Um, it goes without saying that it doesn't matter about the health of your tackles if you don't have your franchise quarterback. And as much as people want to laugh and say it's Eason season, it very well may be. And again, that was kind of something I wanted to get on wax. I don't know. Of course, you think in your mind that if you're in charge of like $1 billion organization, that you have better laid plans than if Carson Wentz and this offensive line can't get some cohesion together right quick. Carson's going to get hurt, and then your offensive line is going to get healthy, and you're going to have Eason running the show. So that was kind of what I came away from that week one game saying was, man, the Colts are in a precarious situation that must be addressed, and there's no way they're not going to address that right quick. And I get it. Um, there was some rumor that I think there was some rumor that Eric Fisher wanted to play week one, so that was kind of like an idea that might have been on the Colts' radar late that may contribute to the poor outing, other than Davenport just not being that good. But yeah, there's some concern with the Colts offensive line. I want to make that something we hit on really hard. It's very hard to advance the football when your outside, like your ends, are just collapsing, right? And then it's gonna limit your run game to between the guards and centers, right? You're running a lot of ISOs, a lot of dives. Um, it's gonna be hard to run the ball outside, but you're gonna want to run uh, a tight end to Carson Wentz's left. I dare say go double tight because of even the thought process of Braden Smith's toe being looked at. I think I saw a local media member here talk about how you may get one tackle and lose the other. Um, I'll put it like this: it's a lot easier to play football when when your blind side's protected, right? Because then you don't have to be thinking about that guy breathing down your neck the whole game because you know that you're that Eric Fisher is going to handle his business. Um, but there's a good chance without a frontside tackle that again the ball is just going to have to come out quick. A lot like the offense that we ran here when I coached semi-pro. Um, I know a lot of people probably aren't going to listen to this podcast with the expectation of me talking about my time coaching, but when it's relevant, I think that I should just speak on that, right? Speak my truth, right? So one of the problems that we had that's very similar is that with the cutters, we had offensive line woes early. Our right, I think it was actually both our tackles went down or were injured. So our left tackle, we had a left-handed quarterback. So our blindside tackle got injured early. Kenneth Tackett got injured early. He wasn't a great tackle, but he did pass block well, and he was a great down blocking tackle, but not a good one-on-one. He's small. Um, our guards and center were foundational on our offensive line all year and had good depth at guard and had multiple guys that played center. But tackles are going to come at a cost, right? Because you need those guys to be pretty big and strong, and then also good athletes, and those are hard to come by because those guys are long. They're not playing semi-pro football. I can promise you that. That said, though, now that I've coached a year of semi-pro, and I think on the first episode I talked about being 4-2, and if the referees and Jeffersonville hadn't screwed it, Xavier Grimble out of a touchdown, I'd be 5-1 as a offensive coordinator and primary play caller in semi-pro, and it was the first year I'd ever met any of those people. I'd like to continue to coach. I want to I want to be with the cutters. I want to be with the guys that I coached. They know me and know what I want to do and how I am. Um, and I think that we need to talk. And I think the writing is pretty clearly for me on the wall that the Battleground Football League is going to dissolve. And I think if you live in the Indianapolis, Bloomington, Terre Haute, Richmond, wink, wink, nod, nod, and if you love me, if you love football, um, semi-pro football is gonna fall apart here in the area. A league is about to dissolve, and a lot of players are gonna look for a place to go. I want to make sure that to welcome those people into my life, welcome those people, of course, to my podcast community. Welcome those people. I'll share Stampede Blue um, is the sort of the foundation of my content creation career. So, for the record, and again, I want to point this out. I feel like it's worthwhile. Most of the time, when you're looking at somebody talking to you on the internet, they're like psychopaths. They have no credibility. They're just lunatics spouting nonsense. There's no um, foundation behind what they're speaking on, right? Or they're talking about nonsense. Football, again, as I've said before, is my entire life. So when I speak about it, I have to speak very frankly, because if you don't, I'm not trying to be um, a hot take artist, right? I would love to be in sports commentary. I'd love to be the guy between Peyton Manning and his brother, and Peyton and Eli. Peyton Manning and his brother. That's funny to me. But Peyton and Eli, and I don't know if you watch that on ESPN too, but they commentated Monday Night Football, and it was absolutely glorious. Absolutely recommend. Um, but yeah, so I'm not going to sit here and fluff the Colts fan base and say, hey, Eric Fisher's going to come back, Braden Smith's going to be fine, all is going to be well, Carson Wentz is going to save the Colts. I'm not saying that Carson Wentz is or isn't the long-term answer at quarterback for the Colts. But I am going to say the offensive line can't play like it did, and Carson Wentz can't play as poorly as he did, and the Colts also expect to win a football game, and it really doesn't matter how the defense plays if the offense only puts up 16 fucking points. Mic drop, right? So that said, I really was impressed with Zach Pascal. But other than that, the Paris Campbell was splashed. Um, Naheem Hines was very useful. Uh, Jonathan Taylor was very useful. Um, so you can't play average football against good teams and expect to win is kind of the overarching theme from week 1. But I have a strong feeling it's going to carry over into week 2. So I want to make sure that I level with you up front and say, there's a good chance Colts start out 0-2 here at home also. Uh, but and the NFC West is undefeated, 4-0, as is the AFC West. And by the way, the NFC North is the only defeated conference, 0-4 across the 0-1 across the board conference in the NFL. So yeah, I think that the Colts could very well find themselves in a shootout with a hot Sean McDermott offense, or McVay. I'm stupid. Um, Whatever. Matt Stafford and that Rams offense are coming to town hot. And it's a recipe for disaster because Aaron Donald is attacking the healthy part of your offense. He's going to require a double team, and your tackles are dinged up. So I want to make sure I also say, in week 1, Carson Wentz may got hit a bunch, but he completed a comparable percentage of his passes, uh, and he was only sacked 3 times. And it can get worse. I mean, I don't want to sit here and be the sower of woes, but this is Aaron Donald and Matt Stafford coming in hot. And like I said, the problem from that I have looking at the week 1 is I didn't feel like there was a consistent game plan trying to score touchdowns. Knowing, like when you're 2 scores down and there's less than 5 minutes left in the game and you're running the football, there are extreme scenarios when you'd run the ball. I like draws, right? I like tempo runs, right? But to go up there and line up and let the clock run down under 9 seconds and then hike and run a football with less than 5 minutes in a game is wrong. That you're a game that you're losing by 2 scores? No. No, a game you can absolutely win. In my opinion, if there's 5 minutes left and you're only down 14 points, that's a winnable football game. I didn't say I was going for a tie. I said I'm trying to win the football game in regulation. I absolutely do not want to end a football contest relying on a kicker either way. I want to win going away. Right? Because I just sat here and told you the best football coach on earth, I'd argue, Nick Saban, just said there are teams out here that are planning to score in 3 plays. That's the same way in the NFL, right? These teams out here line up in 4 wide receiver sets, send some number of guys deep, some number of guys short, leak a running back, right? What am I saying, right? And more often than not, they're going to hit the leaking running back or the little tight end or the little short out, right? And then what they're trying to get force is the opposing defenses into single high safety man coverage on the outside because the opposing team wears itself out in the secondary running around all the field all day. It's track meet, right? So you get them in single high safety man coverage on the outside, and then you can burn them on the outside, right? You can throw your fade, right? Throw your streaks, your fly, whatever you call your deep ball, right? The problem is it's like you try to get a defense into that space, and if you can never get them into just rushing four guys, sitting in man coverage, right? Trying to stay on your receiver's hip because your quarterback's throwing lasers. Again, the problem with Carson Wentz is that he second guessed himself frequently. So it's not that he's inaccurate or that he's not athletic enough. It's that he wasn't ready. And that's like another huge knock on a quarterback is coming into a regular season and having a what I would call a borderline acceptable outing. And I am a huge supporter of Carson Wentz. I want him to do really well, and I'm saying like that's like the floor in terms of quality of outing that you can get out of him and win a football game. So I know that puts, I'm not again I can't expect to speak to any of these players, right? But I want to make sure that if they're ever to listen, they don't feel disrespected by what I'm saying. There are a lot of situations where I think that Carson Wentz was looking at the right spot to put the ball, and he didn't do that. Does that make sense? And I think that a lot of us, that feels actually, I hate to try to be deep, right? I'm not trying to force that. I just want to circle back to that and go, now hold on, back up and apply that to your life. It's really, um, G Easy has this song that I try to use it as allegory because it's so raunchy. Say less, right? And it is, and jokingly, I had kind of adopted that as a mindset, right? Where you don't have to yell and scream and blow a whistle and you don't have to. You can just speak softly, have a wealth of knowledge and speak succinctly, and if people listen and are willing to hear and try to take it in and then apply it if they're able, those ardent supporters, right, or those are the people you want to coach, right? So I found, you attract more bees with honey. Um, attract more bees than flies with honey. Um, and the bees obviously do the work. They'll help you make more honey, right? It's allegory. Again, the thought process was uh, Carson Wentz is hyper familiar with Frank Reich's passing system and his offense. And when I take in, some of the, most revered coaches' material and sort of see how it's being taken in and applied by people like Frank Reich. Um, I think he's still learning, and that's something that fans don't like to see. So I also want to make sure I challenge my Colts fan base, my Stampede Blue fan base, to keep that in mind as well. That the coach is still trying to fine tune. There was no trickery. There was some good offensive football. But again, if you do the right thing initially, you got to stick that landing because frequently what's it's almost like don't settle, right? Like, whatever that read was. There's a play that we were talking about. Shout out to Zach Hicks and my Stampy Blue guys, Chris Blystone, all those guys that are warriors at creating content out there. I've talked about Stephen Reed, my Stampy Blue staff. I love y'all. We were talking about that today on Twitter about how there was a play. I think they were running slot seam. I want to say slot seam or maybe skinny post, and the defender is Bobby Wagner, and he turns to the outside to give chase, and Carson Wentz is staring directly at the receiver, and Wagner's head is turned, his shoulders are turned facing away from Carson Wentz, and he's turning to run to chase the receiver. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's like Top Gun, right? So he's like, that's what he's seeing is like, oh, he's got him beat, and there's no help. It's touchdown, and he sees it, and it's like he couldn't make himself just throw a touchdown. He completes the he completes the pass, and it was actually a good ball, and it absolutely was the second read and had to have it. Um, but again, he had the correct read, and he stared right at it. And this is a guy that hunts and fishes, right? And it requires precision. And when you're not ready and you haven't been practicing and you didn't play in the preseason, do you see what I'm getting at? I just keep hitting the same notes, right? I sound like an old man, but it's real. Um, a perfect storm came. You weren't ready, and they are an outstanding football team and football organization. And that's not to take away from the Colts. Colts are one of the more winning football organizations in the last couple decades. But that's not to say that you aren't capable of having subpar outings. And that's what week 1 was. And week 2 is going to be no slouch. Um, I expect a rough and tumble football game. I expect fireworks. I expect a spectacle, a barn burner, a highlight fest, because that's ultimately what I would love to see in the NFL. Right, two offenses that are just running at a high level. I'd love it if I felt like the Colts had the depth to keep up with the sort of configurations of the sort of sets the Rams are capable of coming out with and beating you with. Um, you know, the Rams are capable of being one of the most elite offenses in the NFL, right? Like, so not only it's like saying they're not just like top 8 capable. They're like top 4 capable in the NFL offenses out after having given up a really good outing to a really good organization, right? So could very well be 0-2. That doesn't mean I don't want the Colts to win. It just means that the odds aren't good. They're like a 4 to 6.5 point uh, underdog. So of course, if you bet on them, they're $1,000,000. I just don't know that I would do that just yet. I'd probably wait. That's kind of why I waited to make my podcast today. Um, I didn't want to create a podcast, find out guys were late, and then you've kind of got a junked cast, right? Like you didn't have all the information that you needed. But now I'm pretty comfortable saying like, hey, Braden Smith's iffy. So is Braden Smith's iffy. Braden Smith's iffy. So is Quentin Nelson. Jeez, Jared, don't put that out there. Um, Eric Fisher is iffy. Um, but otherwise, that said though, otherwise, I think there's a good chance maybe Xavier Rhodes doesn't play again. There's a handful of other guys like Kwity Paye and Al Qadim Muhammad that were out or questionable after practice today. And like I said, I didn't want to. I want to make sure I say that on my podcast as I close you out here. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at the Coltist, on Instagram at Coltist, like TEH Coltist, and it's COLTIST. Then you can follow me on Twitter too at Likely Alien. Make sure that you follow Stampede Blue. I'm still repping Stampede Blue. I'm just striking out on my own with this podcast and just talking about what happened this past weekend. Looking forward to what's going on. Kind of looking around the NFL and talking about what we see. And like I said, I think I've been pretty fair with saying like, hey, I'm not saying Carson Wentz is the reason you're lost, but he had what I would call like a bottom acceptable performance, like a barely acceptable performance. He didn't turn the ball over. He just didn't do much. 16 points ain't a lot. You got to do more than 16 points. I just got done coaching semi-pro football, and our goal was to score more than 20 points and allow less than 18, right? So we had a goal of just winning like 21-14, right? Over under of 35, right? Low scoring contests. That was our expectation. The NFL is another step ahead of that. So, right, like the over under is like 46 and a half. So expecting more like like a 24-24 game. It goes to overtime is about where we are. That's the expectation, right? I think it's probably more like a 28-20 game, much like you saw this past week. It's just that I think the Rams aren't quite where where the Seahawks are. Does that make sense? So I expect it to be a challenge and a possible loss, back-to-back home loss for the Colts. I hope I'm wrong too. I want to eat crow. I love it. Birds are great for you. But you got to get past the Rams, and Aaron Donald and Matt Stafford are going to bring it. So anyway, I'll wrap this up. This has been uh, episode 2 of the Coltist. My name is Jared Malad. I appreciate you. If you just click the subscribe button below, give me a follow, give me a shout. You got any questions, comments, concerns, things you want me to talk about, maybe not talk about? I do apologize, of course, if I come off a little like depressing. I'm just realistic, right? I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and tell you like go bet on the Colts. They're super underdogs and they're come out and kick butt just because like they're capable of playing better, right? You gotta best abilities availability, right? We learned that from when I interviewed Eric Ebron a few years ago, right? That's what I got from him was, a lot of guys will question your effort and stuff like that, but you're out there playing on a team that's like everybody's always injured and doesn't want to play. Now it creeps into my mind. I think about the Colts. It just feels like we're never healthy. And we started our season playing a completely healthy team, right? So it's like really, it sinks in that like what's happening in our organization where we're going so hard that we're not fully healthy when the season starts, but we didn't play like it almost makes me mad, right? I feel my blood pressure going up. Like it makes me mad because you didn't play your starters and then they weren't ready and then you have a bunch of injuries on top and it's like that sounds an awful lot like mismanagement because we just got whooped by an organization that was completely healthy, right? That looked like they had their shit together on both sides of the ball. Only allowed 16 points and scored 28, right? Seattle looked like they had it together. The Rams, who they're about to come to town and put it on us, look like they have it all together. And I get it. You can't, control what you can control, Jared, and injuries are part of the game. And, you're supposed to be pro player and all that. And it's like, right. And I'm not talking about, I'm not upset with the players being injured. I'm saying like what's wrong organizationally. Not what's wrong with the players. I know what's wrong with them. They tell you what's wrong with them. He's got like a hurt groin, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like, how are we hurt, but not ready, right? Because usually you equate like super hard work with, oh, he got hurt, right? Or like going too hard and, oh, he got hurt. What? This is the NFL. That doesn't happen. That happens in like in backyard semi-pro football that I just got done coaching. That's what I'm saying. And there's organizations within the NFL that like that's not how they do it, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like some of the we got whooped by what we should be aspiring to be, and I get a lot of people don't like a lot of people don't like the Seahawks. My wife specifically does not like Russell Wilson. He's just like churchy, but he married a rapper. It's weird. You know what I mean? I'm mostly just joking. Um, but yeah, like I for the record love Russell Wilson. He's great. He's great. He called in and talked to the Manning brothers. It was wonderful. He's great for the game. But as long as he's there, Seattle's going to be hyper competitive, and they are already showing like they're a well-run organization that they don't even need to draft well. They're just well-run. These guys are well coached. They were prepared, and the Colts came in and. Your $25 million quarterback had a borderline acceptable outing and was under duress. And it's like your most valuable piece. You just let your pawns go and left your queen uncovered too frequently, expecting it to be able to maneuver out of the focus fire um, too frequently, and got your quarterback hit and dinged up. And there was a couple times, and I get it, I'm kind of running off the rails, but like I just want to get this stuff out, man. There was a couple times where like Carson Wentz stood up and took his helmet off, and he like you could tell he really wanted to like rage, smack his helmet or like whip his helmet, and he like maintained his composure, and for that I am grateful. But I'm just saying like he may run out of that composure and then get injured, and then your offensive line gets healthy, and you can see how it starts to unravel again. And I'm not at all blaming Carson Wentz. It's the circumstances that he's in, and I just want to make sure that I get that out too. And again, I'm not trying to like, ooh, I'm like first to the table with it. These are just very real uh, thoughts that I have, and I want to make sure to share them with you. So I appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the games this week. Go Colts. Obviously, I'd love to see them get a home win against the Rams. That would be such a big win for the Colts. I just want to temper my expectations and yours, and that's all I'm really here for, right? Is that real shit, and you got to have guys like Darius Leonard step up. If you're gonna get run on that defense, you got to produce because there's a lot of missed tackles and a lot of just getting bullied. Like Bobby Okereke getting just absolutely throttled was kind of depressing. You just expected them to lay the hit, not be the hammer, not the nail, right? And they were the nail. Um, so anyway, here's to being the hammer as frequently as as frequently as possible, and just possibly not this week.